At the dawn of the 1950s, Cuba was a country torn by internal contradictions. On the one hand, the island attracted American tourists with its beaches and nightclubs. On the other, the vast majority of Cubans lived in extreme poverty and social inequality. The country's economy was completely dependent on sugarcane and investment from the U.S., making Cuba vulnerable to outside influences. Fulgencio Batista, a military officer and politician, seized power in Cuba in a coup d'etat in 1952, establishing an authoritarian regime. His rule was characterized by brutal suppression of opposition, corruption, and deepening economic dependence on the United States. These factors caused widespread discontent among the population and fostered revolutionary sentiment. At the same time, Fidel Castro, a young lawyer and political activist, and Ernesto Che Guevara, an Argentine physician, entered the political arena. Both shared ideas of social justice and dreamed of a better future for Cuba. Their fates crossed when they joined forces to fight against the Batista dictatorship, seeking radical change on the island. The first major step Castro and his supporters took was the attack on the Moncada barracks on July 26, 1953. This audacious but unsuccessful move was made in order to seize weapons and raise the population to fight against Batista. Although most of the participants were killed or captured, and Castro himself was arrested, the event was a turning point, awakening hope for change among Cubans. During the trial of the participants in the uprising, Fidel Castro delivered his famous "History Will Vindicate Me" speech, in which he defended the right of the people to revolt against tyranny. These words were an important statement of the intentions and goals of the revolutionary movement. After being released from prison through a nationwide amnesty, Castro and his supporters traveled to Mexico, where they continued preparations to resume the struggle. In 1956, they returned to Cuba on the yacht Granma and took refuge in the Sierra Maestra Mountains. There, in the inaccessible mountainous areas, they began forming guerrilla units. Castro, Guevara, and their supporters developed an effective strategy of guerrilla warfare that included attacks on small military units, sabotage, and agitation among the peasantry. This period laid the groundwork for further successes of the Cuban Revolution, rallying more and more supporters around the revolutionary movement and creating a solid foundation for future victories over the Batista regime. From 1956 to 1959, the guerrilla led by Fidel Castro in the Sierra Maestra Mountains became a symbol of tireless and brave freedom fighters. Using tactics of surprise attacks and sabotage, the guerrillas gradually damaged Batista's forces, while expanding their influence among the local population. An important factor in their success was the involvement of Cuban peasants who provided the guerrillas with information, food, and shelter. Che Guevara, in turn, played a key role in organizing and training new recruits, turning the guerrilla into a disciplined and effective fighting force. The key moment of the revolution was the famous Battle for Santa Clara in December 1958, led by Che Guevara. This heroic campaign and the subsequent capture of the city was a turning point in the struggle against the Batista regime. The victory in Santa Clara effectively marked the fall of the dictatorship, as support for Batista among his troops and the population plummeted after this event. At dawn on January 1, 1959, Batista left Cuba, leaving the country on the threshold of a new era. After the victory of the revolution, Fidel Castro and his supporters took charge of the country, promising to build a just society. Sweeping social and economic reforms began. Foreign assets were nationalized, agrarian reform was implemented, and education and healthcare were improved. However, these changes caused tensions with the United States, leading to an economic blockade of the island and a cooling of international relations. During the Cold War, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara have gone down in history as symbols of revolutionary struggle and the pursuit of social justice. Their actions and beliefs had an enormous impact not only on the fate of Cuba, but also on the world political scene, generating a wave of support and criticism. Fidel Castro, after the victory of the revolution in 1959, became a key figure in the new Cuban government. He served as Prime Minister and then President of the Council of State and the Council of Ministers of Cuba, remaining in power until 2008. Under his leadership, Cuba underwent significant social and economic transformation, including nationalization and the introduction of socialist principles of governance. However, his rule was also accompanied by criticism for suppressing political opposition and restricting freedoms. In 2008, Castro handed over power to his brother Raúl Castro due to health problems and passed away in 2016, leaving behind a complex legacy. Che Guevara, after contributing to the victory of the Cuban Revolution and holding several key positions in the government, continued his struggle for revolution in other countries as well. In 1965, he left Cuba to support revolutionary movements in the Congo and later in Bolivia. His mission in Bolivia ended in failure, and in 1967, he was captured by the CIA-backed Bolivian military and executed. Guevara remains one of the most controversial yet admired figures of the 20th century, his image symbolizing the ideals of the struggle for equality and justice. The legacy of Castro and Guevara continues to be hotly contested and debated. For some, they are heroes who fought for liberation from oppression and the pursuit of a better life for ordinary people. For others, they are controversial leaders whose methods and policies led to new forms of inequality and restrictions on freedoms. Regardless of their assessments, their lives and work remain an important part of world history, emphasizing the complexity of the road to social change. Thanks for watching. Put a like. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos.